Links, episode 242.
Broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia, this is the Unshackled Waves with Tim Wills, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Hello and welcome to a special post-election Sunday Night Live episode of the show. Well, Scott Morrison called his election victory a miracle, which was pretty spot on, and Bill Shorten has done a Hillary Clinton and John Hewson and lost the unlosable election. So to discuss the day after the election and for his own fresh analysis, I'm joined by the senior editor of the Unshackled, Damien Ferri. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Now, you weren't part of our election night live stream, so I'd just like to get straight up, before we get into the results, your reaction to on the night to what you saw happen, which was pretty remarkable.
Well, actually, I wasn't surprised. I know a lot of people, a lot of the polls, they were all pointing towards a Labor victory, but at the end of the day, I didn't see a mood for change in the electorate. I was always thinking that the Liberals will just scrape over the line, and they got exactly in the spot that I thought they would. So it wasn't a surprise to me. I didn't see any mood for change in the electorate. I know that people were concerned about the extreme measures that the Labor Party were going to take us in as a nation. And in that, I think the voters did what was expected and really voted according to who they thought was best to run this country. Regardless of what people were saying in the media and the amount of money on the left that they were trying to pump towards these campaigns, it just didn't work. And it showed just how out of touch the elite are, and that they're not really in tune with the modern day voter on the ground.
Well, let's have a look. There's been another day of counting, so the results are somewhat more concrete. I'll just bring it up on the screen here. So this is the ABC party totals. So the coalition, a 41.4% primary vote. That's a swing of 0.7%. They're projected to win 75 seats at this stage. That's just one short of a majority, and the Labor Party has got a primary of 33.9%, which is a swing away of it of 0.8%, and they're projected to win 65 seats. So it's 3 have gone to the coalition, and Labor have lost 3 seats. The Greens, they've suffered a 0.2% swing against them of 10%. They retain 1 seat, the seat of Melbourne, and others on 5. Now, if we just go to the seats in doubt here, we see Bass in Tasmania. The Liberals are ahead, so that would give them 76. In Chisholm, the Liberals are ahead. That would give them 77. Cowan in Western Australia, ALP ahead. I'd say they'd win that. Same as Lilly. Macquarie, I'd still say it could go either way. So it's I know that a lot of left-wing commentators and people on the ABC have said, oh, it'll be a coalition government, but we don't know whether it'll be a minority or majority. It's going to be a majority. You know that. Come on. Stop trying to delay that admission.
Yeah, definitely. I see Bass going to the Liberals, and based on that, they'll have the 76 that they need. Chisholm as well, very, very close, too close to call. I mean, it's only a 0.1 percentage difference there. So, yeah, I wouldn't be able to call that one yet. But, you know, I mean, when you have a look at how well the Liberals performed in, say, a state like an electorate like Lilly, I mean, Lilly has always been a Labor seat in Queensland. It's not your traditional kind of Liberal heartland seat, and they performed really well. I mean, this is just how different areas were in tune to different issues in this country. So I think people really need to understand that. Macquarie, another one that, you know, Macquarie is in the seat in the Blue Mountains area of New South Wales, and that's normally a Labor seat. The Liberals have won it in the past. And that one there, to swing towards the Liberals as it did, is quite remarkable.
Yeah, obviously the swing in Queensland was greatest, and I think that the message that was clear from the voters of Queensland is we want that Adani mine. It wasn't just swings in North Queensland; it was also in the south. I mean, the fact that they're nearly losing Wayne Swan's old seat of Lily, which is in the middle of Brisbane. I mean, they didn't take too kindly the people of Queensland to Bob Brown's Adani convoy coming up and saying no, 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 we don't want you to have jobs.
That's exactly right. The Adani issue was at the heart of the Queensland campaign. And the thing that really frustrates me is that the people on the left within the Labor Party, the commentators, they don't understand and they don't get it. They are in denial that the Adani mine was such an impact on their votes. You know what they're saying? They're just saying, oh, yeah, it was because of the money that Palmer put out there and his preferences that pushed him over the line. It was more than that. I mean, if Palmer didn't run, those voters would have went to the Liberal Party anyway. So it didn't make any difference. It was people wanted jobs in their area, and they are sick and tired of this climate change extremism that is pushed in the media on and on every day. I mean, the amount of times we heard every time the ABC would come up and say, Vote Compass has said that climate change is the biggest issue according to voters, and that it's the biggest issue according to young people. Well, I never got polled. You never got polled, and a lot of people that are supporters and that are readers that are young never got polled on what important issues impact our votes. That is the problem here. We are not getting asked our opinions. Their opinions are only asked to uni students and to people that live 5 kilometres from a CBD of Sydney or Melbourne, and people aren't going out to where other opinions and views are held. And this is an impact here, and if the Labor Party doesn't understand that they need to get away from the Greens and start working for the working class voters of this country, they will remain in opposition for a very, very long time.
And I'm just going to bring up the two-party preferred vote, because you mentioned the polls there. The Liberal National Coalition, well, there's only been just over 10 million votes counted. Two-party preferred, 51.06, and we have the Australian Labor Party on 48.94. Now, the final news poll was 51.5 to Labor, 48.5 to the Coalition, and the Galaxy 9 exit poll was 52 to Labor, 48 to Coalition, and the polls were just completely wrong. And so everyone's saying, because Sunday night's normally news poll night, I don't think we'll be, hanging out for the news poll for a while, or we'll be going like Peter Van Onselen and his news poll. Wow, we'll be news poll like whatever.
Well, the problem is, I think they need to get rid of polls because they do a lot of damage. I mean, polls are used and manipulated by parties to put in a view out there of this is what's going to happen, and they try and sway voters a certain way in order to support that poll and build on it. And that is the problem we have here. I mean, people on this particular time, it worked against them. They thought, well, Labor's going to win and they're going to scrape in, and a lot of people were scared of a Bill Shorten government coming in, and they thought, you know what, I don't want to see that happen, so I'm going to make sure that I don't allow it to happen. So they worked against them. They thought that pushing this narrative of the Labor Party being the strong performers and the Liberal Parties being out of the game, and of all these, the climate policies and everything, the left were banging on about, the Get Up support, the millions pumped into this, that this was going to get them over, and it didn't. Sucked into them. But at the end of the day, I reckon that polls do a really great damage to us. I mean, people should be focused on the issues. They shouldn't be focused on personality. They shouldn't be focused on the little things that the media like to rave on about. And this is the problem we have right now.
Yeah, and the irony is that 4 prime ministers have been knifed because of polls, and we've just had an election where the polls were wrong, and so we've basically based the body politic of our politicians has treated the polls as gospel, and that's why we haven't had a prime minister who hasn't served a full term since John Howard.
Exactly right. I mean, like you mentioned, many people got knifed because of poll results, because those polls were saying that particular person wasn't going to get anywhere. I mean, that's how polls are manipulating the general discussion, and they are obviously leading to a fall in leadership and to this, we need to be a popularity contest all of a sudden. I mean, it's not about that. It's about what platform you present to the people. It doesn't matter if your leader, comes across as tough, if he comes across as, a nice, soft person. At the end of the day, voters want to know, what is this party going to do to this country? And what polls do, they've created a lot of instability within the last, many years, since 2007 onwards. So that's over 10 years now that we've had polling leadership instability, all because of polls. And I think it's wrong. I think it takes people away from the real issues that they need to focus on. And we need to do something about this. I mean, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, but hopefully now people are going to see that polls aren't as spot on as you think. I mean, in previous elections, they are pretty accurate, but this time around, when I saw, like you mentioned, about a 51-49, I actually, in my head, said, I think that it's the opposite way around, and that the Liberals are on the 51 and the Labors are on the 49. That was my thought because of how I saw the public reaction to how things were going. Even though you are watching TV constantly and getting one view pushed out to you, sometimes you have to see and talk to people around you and just see where the mood is going. I mean, even though you might be thinking it's going one direction because that is the only point of view coming across to you on TV, it's more than that. And normally you have to see that it's not legit. It's not the only thing that's happening here. And that's how I felt anyway.
Well, let's have a look at the reasons why the coalition won. Now, they're blaming it all on a scare campaign about taxes. The irony of Labor complaining about a scare campaign, where in 2016 they ran that Medi-Scare campaign. But Labor, they did obviously want to go after retirees with the franking credits. Well, it affects everybody, and also negative gearing. And then there was also the flirtation that some of their members had with death taxes. And so, Labor had gone to the election saying, we're going to increase taxes. We're going to change a lot of the rules which have been in place for a while. And the Australian people, they're like anyone else. They don't want to pay more tax.
That's exactly right. I mean, on the tax issue, you've just mentioned it right there, plain and simple, and the Labor Party refused to understand. I mean, like John Howard actually said last night, they are trying to cause division within the people and play classes on each other. And people are sick and tired of that game. I mean, it may have worked in the past, but it doesn't work anymore. The whole story of the big end of town. I mean, to the Labor Party, a small business owner that scrapes by could be a big guy, a big end of town guy, and people just are smarter than that. I mean, you can't pitch the majority of hard workers against your small amounts of either people on the minimum wage or people that are on the dole, and just say that's the divide in this country. It just isn't like that at all. You have your death taxes. Death taxes wouldn't have affected just the rich. It would have affected everybody. I mean, a lot of people have a parent that has a home. I mean, it's not uncommon for this to happen unless your parents, for instance, were on welfare. People that worked hard were able to afford a house back in the day when houses were cheap, and they were able to have a home. And for them to be able to say that if you have a $400,000 home and that you pass that on to your kid after you die, and that the government is going to take $160,000 out of that $400,000 out of it, I mean, is absolute criminal behaviour, and I just can't understand what the logic is. But the problem is, even though Labor has backflipped on this issue, ACTU President Sally McManus has come out and said we need this death tax. You've had the Greens support a death tax, and who does Labor listen to? They listen to the unions and they listen to the Greens. So at the end of the day, it was going to be a reality. Also, on the retirees, taxing them, retirees that have assets aren't necessarily rich. I mean, they're people that worked hard. They could have been, once upon a time, Labor voters, you know, Labor voters that were working class, but given the times, were able to afford a home and to get ahead. But now they want to attack anybody with anything. If you have just any assets, any little thing, you're the big end of town, you know? I mean, I'm actually surprised that Gilmore went the way it did, because there's a lot of retirees in that seat, but I think local issues with the campaign against Mundine played a part. But at the end of the day, the tax issue was very, very important to a lot of voters.
And this was also called the climate change election. Of course, Labor was going to the election with a 50% renewable energy target. Turnbull was deposed because the party room, in the end, didn't like his national energy guarantee, and they've got rid of the emissions reductions and just gone with the baseload power commitments. But yeah, they decided, despite their carbon tax loss in 2013, Labor, they still decided to go on with actioning climate change, albeit in a different form. And yeah, like Australians don't like paying more tax, they don't like to give like an extra tip to the electricity companies.
That's exactly right. And as I mentioned before, when it came to taxes, this would impact the working class the most. I mean, if you are a yuppie in a high-end apartment that, is a Green voter, which normally ends up being the case, you've got money to afford these electricity costs that rise. But if you're a working class person struggling, you're the one who's going to be impacted. I mean, I think the Labor Party are underestimating the attack that they have done on their base. They have attacked their base so hard, and every time they warm up to the Greens, their working class base turn against them. We have seen it in Queensland in this election. I mean, you could look back in 2004 when you saw John Howard getting hugs off workers of the logging industry over in Tasmania, and that lost Latham the election easily. I mean, this has happened every time they get close to the Greens. And instead of every election, reporters going to the Liberal Party and saying, why is it that you're doing a preference deal with One Nation? How dare you? They should be going to the Labor Party and saying, why are you preferencing the extreme Green Party? They are affecting your votes and they are damaging you because they are an absolute attack on your base. I mean, that is where it is, and yet you don't have the media doing this. And every time they continue to go down with this green climate change agenda, electric cars, push up the electricity bills and all the rest of it, they are going to pay the ultimate price, and they deserve it in the end.
And then, of course, immigration is an issue of concern to Australians. They want immigration reduced. They want it stopped from the Middle East and North Africa. Now, the coalition was saying we're going to cut the immigration by 30,000 a year. Labor, they only supported that because the unions want lower immigration, but they wanted to increase the refugee intake, which is what we're probably getting some of the most trouble from. So, it wasn't much of a choice on immigration, but I'd say on that issue, the voters went with the lesser of two bad parties on that one.
Well, immigration plays a big deal to our nation, and again, where does it impact? It impacts the working class the most, because the immigrants, when they come here, don't move into the rich areas. They move into the working class areas, and they are the people that are going to get impacted where it comes to the amount of crime that rises in those areas, when it comes to economically, the amount of welfare increases that are going to hit us the most, or when it even comes to the challenge that they face when they're looking for a job, and these workers come in on cheap labour, decreased wages, and also more competition in the workforce. I mean, they're looking for work. At the moment, we've got only so many jobs and more people than we do jobs, yet they keep on increasing the population, which means that they have more competition all the time when they're looking for work, and they're going to have more chance of not finding a job. I mean, this is how it works here. I mean, people know that these workers from overseas can get exploited, and the ones that don't work at all are obviously going to be a burden for us on the welfare system. So either way, what do we get as a benefit of a nation taking these people in? Just so people in the high end of town in their nice $1 million apartments can sip their wine and say, oh, look how nice we are, of people. Look how, look what we have done. But they're not facing the problems here. They don't face it. We face it. And that is the problem that we're encountering. And that is why, like many other issues, the people are starting to turn.
And of course, Labor were promising more hate speech laws. Obviously, Scott Morrison cucked quite a bit in the months leading up to the election, promising, he wanted social media to crack down on hate speech, had a policy to crack down on online trolls. But Labor, they wanted to empower the Human Rights Commission further to crack down on hate speech and expand 18C to cover other attributes such as the LGBT people, and wanted an LGBT discrimination commissioner, which would have made it probably illegal to misgender somebody or say anything that could be interpreted as like homophobic or whatever.
Exactly. That would have been very dangerous for our society if we went down that road. I mean, this is getting closer and closer to the Orwellian Marxist type of system that people read about and think, oh, this might be a fantasy, but it's becoming a reality. I mean, if anything, as much as the economic agendas that the Labor Party that would have hurt this country, I think socially it would have hurt it even more. The loss of freedom of speech, I mean, we saw this with Israel Folau. I actually reckon that Folau, the verdict coming Friday, the day before election, was actually a blessing in disguise, because I think that might have woken a lot of people up and said, you know what, this is very, very disheartening, and this is going to happen more and more time and time again, where people aren't allowed to have any opinions that go against this mainstream rhetoric. And freedom of religion, we are seeing attacked as well. This is another issue I have to raise up. A lot of Catholic schools were very, very scared of the Labor Party coming in, because they knew that the Labor Party have an agenda against them. And the Catholic schools can't even hire based on the people that carry the same principles. I mean, why is it that the Catholic schools don't have a right, or at least Labor Party didn't want them to have a right, to be able to hire people that carried the faith and that, for instance, weren't LGBT or anything that was a contrary. I mean, this is something of association that just wouldn't have. Parents send kids to their school thinking they are going to get this, yet the Labor Party are trying to make them no different to a public school, which defeats the purpose of having it there in the first place. I mean, they aren't able to follow the religion properly if you have these sort of things infiltrating the schools. And not only that, I mean, we can also talk when it comes to tax, the taxpayer-funded abortions that Labor Party wanted to bring in as well. I think that was very, very extreme. And I think a lot of people felt that was an impact on their vote as well. I mean, a lot of people have to understand here that even though Christians and
Oh, we lost Damien there for a moment. He'll call back, but I'll add to that, well, Scott Morrison, during the campaign, he didn't provide much of a defence about Israel Folau. Here's Damien back there. I was just saying, Damien, that Scott Morrison, he didn't really, during the campaign on religious issues. In fact, he went the other way to say that, we accept you in Australia regardless of sexuality. But it was interesting in his election speech, he talked about miracles, which is a Christian thing, and at the end he said, God bless Australia. I don't think even Tony Abbott said that, devout Catholic, when he was Prime Minister. That was an extremely religious note to end on.
And I think that was great. I really enjoyed it. I really thought, wow, this is great. I mean, we've got a leader here that isn't afraid to say something like that. It's like in America. I mean, that is a common thing for somebody to say. I mean, it's not controversial. And on the religious note, it played an impact on people's minds. I mean, abortion, and also on the safe school program that's very extreme and people are against, and on the basis of the school being able to employ teachers with the ethos. Very important issues to many parents that send their children to these schools. You know, they underestimate that. They think that the country is turning one way, but they only are in their own echo chamber, that they don't like to branch out and see what else is happening elsewhere, and they pay the ultimate price for that.
And of course, it also came down to personality. I mean, Bill Shorten is the most awkward, robotic candidate that Labor's ever put up for Prime Minister. I mean, well, he only... people have to remember in 2013, the ALP members, they voted for Anthony Albanese, but Shorten, being the faction man that he is, stitched up the party room, and so he became a leader, and he's had 2 goes at it. He came back in 2016, and so second time around, like, he thought this is my time, and the Australian people have seen right through him. I mean, everyone knows what Shorten's like behind the scenes. He's a real nasty guy. Well, Scott Morrison, you know, he comes across as genuine, relatable. Like, even when he was talking with Waleed Ali, like, he still managed to get on Waleed's level, which was a very difficult thing. And it was very telling. Everyone was saying that when Bob Hawke passed away on Thursday night, that, oh, this is going to benefit Labor. But Bill Shorten paying tribute to Bob Hawke delivered it in the most robotic way I've ever seen, displaying no emotion. And I think that probably made a lot of people who were thinking of Bob Hawke saying, wow, this guy is devoid of anything.
Well, I actually, at first, like most people, I watched it and I thought, you know what, it's all over and done with now. I mean, Hawke, I mean, imagine something like this happening 2 days before, almost like it was planned. I mean, like, even ABC was saying, oh, you know, this is going to give Labor a boost. I mean, imagine something like this happening. But in saying that, it could have worked against them too, because people could have seen, okay, Hawke was such a great guy, but look at Shorten and Hawke. You know what I mean? Look at the difference here. Shorten isn't the Hawke or whatever of past. So in saying that, it could have made people compare to somebody they used to like back in the 80s and someone now that they absolutely despise. So it's something that could have worked against them, you know. I mean, and very robotic of a person, very robotic. I mean, someone that has absolutely no values. And I mean, this is why I say, in a lot of ways, I admire people that are either on the far right or the far left, because at least they stand for something. Whereas all these people in the middle here, you know, your neoliberal sort of shills, they really just, they're puppets, you know what I mean? They have no ideology whatsoever. No, I mean, they just go with whatever is feeded to them. And Bill is a very fake person. I mean, imagine a Liberal Party person running for Prime Minister that, for instance, was an adulteress. I mean, somebody that, you know, married twice and, you know, I mean, that wouldn't happen. Imagine the scandal that would be. Yeah, nobody even mentioned that about Bill Shorten's character, you know what I mean? Like, rape allegations.
Yeah, the
I mean,
feminists
you know,
all supported him, even though, you know, he, like, what happened to believe all women, hashtag me too. Oh, but not if it's our Bill. That's
right. I mean, anyone on the left seems to be able to get away with these kind of acts. I mean, you've noticed that it's actually... there's not many people on the conservative side of politics that are involved in it. I mean, fair enough, Steve Dixon or whatever in a strip club, but I mean, normally you're hearing a lot of people on the Greens or in the Labor Party that have been married, you know, millions of times, that say really bizarre things like Greens candidates that, you know, support bestiality and necrophilia, yet don't get this endorsed, yet the media don't touch and put pressure on them. You know what I mean? Like the Labor Party and Luke Creasley, I mean, saying things that took him ages to be able to sort of, you know, and Luke sort of stepped aside in the end of the day, but I mean, they were standing by him, even though he was saying things that were anti-lesbian, that were anti, you know, Christian. He was saying, you know, a lot of, you know, rape jokes. Yeah, on the left, you can do it. If you're on the conservative side of politics, you're done. That's it. You're finished. And I mean, one thing that really frustrated me was that the Liberal Party disendorsed candidates that even didn't say things that were that controversial. I mean, it could have been the little, the little sort of criticisms of Islam, for instance, like little tiny criticisms, not even like anything extreme, yet they got disendorsed from it. And the left had candidates that said really bizarre and really extreme things, yet nothing at all. And unless they were really pressed on it, it took them ages to do it. So, I mean, that's the difference here. The Liberals have to learn, like the left, that you have to stand by your candidates, because ultimately you become weaker as soon as you let them to the Sharks. You stand by them and say, you know what, that was the person's opinion, big deal, he said it in the past, get over it, and that's it. And they can't say anything then, It doesn't become an issue after a few days, it blows over. And that's what they have to do, Stand up for your free speech, let the people say what they need to say. As long as they're not directly attacking your party platform, then it shouldn't be an issue. That's how I see it.
Well, it's because the Liberals, they cucked on so many issues in the lead up to the election. I mean, after Christchurch, for example, Scott Morrison said, I'm not just, a for, the Christian religion, I'm, a Prime Minister for all religions are equal. And we've already been through all the hate speech laws that Scott Morrison supported, and that's why a lot of people on the right look to minor parties, One Nation, Fraser Anning, and also Clive Palmer's United Australia Party. Clive spent $50 million, and then there's also the Australian Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. Let's have a look at the Senate. This is the first preference for all states and territories. Now, the Liberal vote is all split up here because in some states they run Liberal, sometimes it's Liberal National. In Queensland, it's Liberal National Party. In WA, the Liberals run a split ticket. In Northern Territory, the Country Liberals. We'll do some quick math here. 29%, 35%. So around about 35% for the coalition in the upper house, so that's about 2.5 quotas. The Australian Labor Party, they've 19% plus Labor, Country Labor in New South Wales 10%, so that's 29%, so that's a quota of 2. Now the Greens nationally have polled 11.23%, so they're actually on track to retain all of their Senate seats, which means that we'll still have Sarah Hanson-Young, we'll still have Larissa Waters, we'll still have Marine Faruqi, so we've got and Jordan Steele-John as well, so they're all going to be back. If we go down further, so we've got Pauline Hanson's One Nation, 5% nationally, but that is all concentrated in Queensland. I'll just switch to Queensland briefly. As we can see there, Pauline Hanson's One Nation, 9.89. So Malcolm Roberts is on track to return to the Senate. Now remember that One Nation got 2 senators last at the double dissolution election on an 8% primary. They got both Pauline and Malcolm Roberts. So they always do well below the line and on preferences. You remember in New South Wales, Mark Latham polled 6%. They ended up getting 2 in the upper house. Yep. And if you go down further, Centre Alliance, well, they bombed minus 3%, 0.23%. Australian Conservatives, Cory Bernardi's party, that experiment hasn't worked. They got 0.75. And Darren Hinch, well, goodbye to him, 0.6%. Fraser Anning's Conservative National Party, 0.64. Again, that's another vote that is concentrated in Queensland, so we'll just switch to that. So 1.35 for Fraser Anning's party, which is 18,000 votes, so a lot more than the 19 votes he got last time, but it seemed that the Nationalists in Queensland, they still decided to vote for Pauline Hanson, the brand that they know. Liberal Democrats, they had a senator up for re-election. They suffered a 1% swing against them, 1.12. It's fair to say without the presence of Lionhelm, love him or hate him, he was able to get publicity. So party in their first post-Lionhelm election has gone backwards. United Australia Party, for Clive's $50 million, he got 2.16%, again concentrated in Queensland. let's go to... Hang on, I'll have to adjust the votes here. They only got 3.31% here. So basically, Clive wasn't able to buy a seat in Parliament. And the voters, they'd seen this movie before and they didn't want Clive back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, people didn't know what he stood for at the end of the day. I mean, what did Clive actually want to do, want to achieve? I think that if Clive pumped this $50-60 million the first time he ran, I think that it would have worked for him and it would have been massive, absolutely massive, considering that he ended up getting a number of senators that election back in 2013. But this time around, people were thinking, well, he didn't do anything last time, and it was, I mean, he didn't really put much effort in, so why should we support him this time around? I think that at the end of the day played on people's minds here. And the fact that people didn't really know what he stood for. I mean, I still didn't really know what he stood for. I mean, it was very generic advertising. So at the end of the day, people went for more recognisable brands, such as, say, One Nation on that side of politics, and they supported what they knew. When it comes to, I'm just having a look at all the parties that ran, and most got under 1%, so it's 0 point something percent. The couple of parties that did poll over the 1%, Animal Justice at 1.2%, remarkably, the Hemp Party 1.89%. That's quite a big number there. So they did pretty well.
Yeah.
The Shooters, Fishers and Farmers, 1.64. So they're definitely people that do better at a state level. And apart from that, everybody else got under the 1% mark. And there was, at least in my state of New South Wales, there was 35 parties. So, and I think Victoria, there was pretty much just as many as well. Some of the other states were a little bit less, but our two states, there was a lot of parties there representing there, that's for sure.
Yeah, and this was the first Senate election under the new Senate voting system, where you can vote 1 to 6 above the line or 1 to 12 below the line. So you control your preferences. The parties have their how to vote card. And it's not, people remember you used to put the 1 above the line and the group voting ticket decide where the preference will go, but because that allowed people like Ricky Muir to get elected with less than 1% of the vote, that was why that system was banned in the federal. It came in the double dissolution in 2016, but because of the lower quota of around 7%, it meant that more minor parties were able to win. But this one was the full 14.3% quota. So obviously only. We haven't mentioned. In Tasmania, Jackie Lambie is set to return. She got, if I just bring it up quickly, in Tasmania, how could I forget Jackie? She got 8.64%. So yeah, pretty well for her.
Yeah, that's a big surprise. I mean, because she has been away from the scene for quite a little while, and that's a massive vote. I mean, One Nation only got 3.5, 3.59% in that state. I thought they would do a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, she wasn't too bad of a candidate, I guess. There was a lot worse out there. So it'll be interesting to see how she goes. She hasn't been in it for a while, but nevertheless, we'll just see what the future holds for Jackie.
We've got a super chat in the YouTube live. PhD Mike Litteris, who said, discuss the issue of Israeli dual loyalty in Australian politics. Well, obviously, you can't run for federal parliament if you're a dual citizen, so it doesn't matter if you're Israeli or something else. That's why Avi Yemeni ran for state parliament, not federal parliament. So, yeah. Hopefully everyone's learnt their lesson from the last parliament. Nobody turns out to be a dual citizen this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, obviously, because it's something that we faced many times with many candidates, and people have to know where their loyalty lies. They have to understand that you can't be representing more than one nation, and that you have to stick to, who do you choose at the end of the day? I mean, if politics is very important to you, especially, and you choose to run, then, be a sole citizen of Australia, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not something that really gives you much benefits of holding a dual citizenship anyway. So I think people really need to understand that. And hopefully in the future, we're not going to continue going down that line and getting that mess anymore.
So obviously, despite all the hit jobs on One Nation and Pauline Hanson, the nationalists in Queensland, they still went with her party. Fraser Anning, the left have been celebrating he's been booted out of Parliament. That's been the headline. Obviously, the party came together at the very last minute. We're able to run candidates in all Queensland seat bar one. So for sort of a last minute thing, I mean, nearly got the same primary vote as Bob Katter's party, which is pretty decent. Now, obviously, the party attracted people who thought that Pauline Hanson had cucked, especially under the influence of Mark Latham. She no longer supports a burqa ban, Islamic immigration ban, while Fraser Anning, he is firmly in favour of those. But obviously, I mean, yeah, it's not the worst result. I mean, still... I mean, in Queensland, still okay, but yeah, it's obviously the sort of the hardcore nationalist community. It would seem is still quite fringe.
Well, I wouldn't call it fringe. I mean, considering he got over 48,000 votes, I mean, nobody can, pull the line of he was elected at 19 votes anymore. I mean, 48,000 is still a lot of people. I mean, they can't dismiss that, I mean, he got a national vote of 0.64%, right? And that was just slightly less than the Australian Conservatives. And the Australian Conservatives of Bernardi is a fairly big brand, I mean, there's not many people, apart from the couple that were over the 1% mark, like the Animal Justice, the Hemp, the Shooters, and the LDP, as well as, of course, the United Australia Party, Hanson, and the Greens, Labor and Liberal. They're the only parties that polled ahead of Fraser's. So he didn't do too bad considering the circumstances. I mean, they made it hard for him because they only gave him 10 days to prepare. 10 days after his name was officially registered on the AEC is all the time he had to prepare for this election. He was able to seat every Queensland seat, as far as I'm aware, and ran Senate seats in all of the country, senators in every state, which, not every party does either. And he was able to get a couple of lower house representatives in different states. I actually thought he would do better in that and have more people representing in New South Wales, for instance, especially. But at the end of the day, even though he had, I think he was saying 300 people apply, they just didn't have the time to go through them all. And 10 days, that is not much of time there. But what he can get out of this is he can say, well, we did good considering the circumstances. And next time round, if we continue to be present on social media and push our view across, we will build from here. Because as soon as One Nation, for instance, if they ever continue to upset their base, then Fraser will be there as another party where they can turn to him. And that's why he needs to maintain here, not just drop out and quit. He needs to stay and he needs to keep on pushing because it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, One Nation was very lucky that it just was something that happened overnight for them, but normally it takes years and years. I mean, with the CDP, the Greens, I mean, these are parties that have been around for 30 years. It takes decades for them to build on their vote.
Yeah.
So if they remain present, and like the article that I saw the other day, they said that Fraser on social media got the most hits. Fraser Anning, out of every party, it got the most hits and the most Facebook shares and everything like that. So he's got following. All he needs to do is maintain this and build from there.
Yeah, I'm saying that like it's a good start, but there's still a long way to go that to build that hardcore nationalist base, and I completely believe that it's a different result to what the Liberal Democrats and Australian Conservatives got. I mean, Cory Bernardi he'd already been in the Senate for 10 years when he formed the Australian Conservatives. I mean, he got to go on Sky News nearly every day, 2GB, about the same. He had a very slick social media marketing. I always saw videos for people like Sophie York and Lyle Shelton. Lyle Shelton was another big name. Obviously, he was big during the marriage campaign, yet they got less than 1%, despite, that operation, that very professional operation. It just seemed that sort of like sort of plain vanilla conservatism. It just wasn't what people were buying. And like I've already been through Liberal Democrats, sort of without sort of the a personality like Linehelm, who's prepared to sort of be a bit controversial. There's sort of nobody pays attention.
That's exactly right. And like I said, if he remains in the game, he can pick up from here. Even though, like you mentioned, that it's a hardcore nationalist sort of type of voter, but 48,000? I mean, that is a lot of people. I mean, the Katter Party only got 22,000, 0.3%, and he's been around forever. So that does have a big difference. And like the amount from the Australian Conservatives to the Fraser Party is very small. The difference there, and like you mentioned, Bernardi, a professional operation, been in the Senate for many years, always on your boomer networks and all that. So in saying that, when you look at that, that is a loss for the Australian Conservatives and a win for the Fraser Party, just based on that. I mean, if they can edge that close to the Conservative Party, then you're seeing something here. You're seeing a movement here that's going to be something one day. As long as he does the right thing, remains in the game, he's going to become potentially something big in the future. And he can't be written off here. I mean, if ever there was a case that One Nation was to stumble, then his party would just rapidly gain, and he would be the next One Nation party. And that's why, with One Nation being very non-professional in a lot of cases, and having scandals, having a lot of problems affect them, then they have to be wary that any hits to that party can potentially then move the crowd onto the next party that resembles or that has any sort of correlation of views with One Nation. And because the Katter Party only really concentrating in the north of Queensland, and Fraser has shown that he wants to spread out nationally, that means to me that he could definitely capitalise here in the future.
Now let's get to the favourite part of the show, the leftist tears from the past 24 hours. I've got a drink of leftist tears. Those tears are so yummy. And even though I'd been on air for 6.5 hours doing the live stream, I still could not sleep because I was just going on Twitter, reading all of the comments, just bathing in those tears. And it was just, and it was compared to like Trump because the same thing happened. I mean, yeah, oh, what a night.
Exactly. I mean, this is what happens when you believe you're in a situation where you're undefeatable. I've been saying for a while that this really felt like a 1993 election, and proved out to be the case because of the extreme agendas that were being pushed by the Labor opposition. And I'm actually happy that they did come out and announce all these policies, because they did it with pride and thinking, you know what, this is going to resonate, this is going to be so popular, we're going to have all our media buddies all behind us, pushing us up. But at the end of the day, it worked against them. And I was actually, I would have been more scared if they didn't really say a lot and remained very silent about their policies, and then won the election and impacted this after they won. So I'm very glad that what they wanted to present to us was out there, because people were then able to analyse that and say, yeah, sorry, but this isn't what we want. This is very, very extreme, and it doesn't represent the working class like the Labor Party are supposed to. I mean, these days I've noticed the only people that continue to vote Labor without any sort of, I can say, reasoning, and that people just continue to stay on that tribalistic sort of method are people that are very, very elderly, that have done it all their lives and don't want to change their vote. A lot of people, for instance, ethnic populations that don't really understand what's going on in the political sphere and have just been told, oh yeah, Labor's for the working man, they're for us, the Liberals are the bad guys, and they go with that all their lives. But as soon as these people start to die out within the next, 20 years, say, 10, 20 years, then what happens? We're going to have a population that are a little bit more in tune, that are actually going to be able to understand the issues and what's going on. And the Labor Party of today isn't the Labor Party of the early days. They have changed a lot, and that is why people have to understand this. I mean, they continue not to support you, but to keep you where you are with breadcrumbs. This is what they do. They're giving you just the minute of handouts just to keep you there, just to keep you alive. They don't want to boost you up and actually raise you and make your lives better. And people are starting to realize this, giving you handouts and all these sort of, oh, we'll take care of you, this sort of nanny state kind of attitudes doesn't help. It only keeps you buried in the ground where you are, and it doesn't lift you. And that's something I've noticed as well.
I'm just going to switch to the article that I did today. So the headline I led with, A Political Miracle and Leftist Tears. And the best one is this young Labor volunteer wearing the Bill Shorten from Maribyrnong crying. And then there's the famous Billary meme that's being shared all over the place. I saw political posting mama Mariki Rancy share that. So it's going around. Egg Boy, he was spotted at Labor Party HQ. Looks like, metaphorical eggs on his face this time. Egg Boy, a Labor supporter. Gee, I didn't pick that. And I'll just go through some of the best tweets. So this is from Windswept Joe. I say we remove Queensland from the rest of the country and send them all to Mars. And then there were so many. This one here by Arabia Knights. Rip Australia, we just voted for climate change denying, white supremacist, Islamophobic, homophobic, misogynist, anti-worker, conservative government with no agenda beyond enriching their wealthy mates because we're a nation of bigoted morons. Well, you're certainly encouraging people to vote for you next time.
Exactly. This is exactly what I was saying before. I mean, these people are in the clouds. They're in their echo chambers. They don't understand what the real people of Australia want. The normal person, the hard worker. And when they come out with these sort of posts, they are completely in denial. They have to quit being that extremist element in society. They need to understand what is right for our nation and support it. I mean, they can, obviously have the freedom to believe whatever they want. But at the end of the day, this is poison, I mean, they come out and say, oh, look at what we voted for, and they can't even acknowledge the result as, well, the people chose that because of you, because of people like you that have your views. They are being rejected, I mean, your views are being rejected, and if you continue on that line, then you will continually be in opposition and never get anywhere politically. I mean, people are very, very scared of that extremist far left element in society, and it's building with the media, it's building with the majority of politicians, even a lot of the Liberals that are really going soft and turning away from it. I think it really showed in Warringah, for instance. We have to bring this up. Tony Abbott losing his seat. I mean, I think what it shows is if you've got millions and millions of dollars to go into a seat and with the only aim to remove somebody then you can make an impact like that. I mean, on the voter there. A Liberal seat, and they were able to change that overnight. And I think Stegel got about 58% to 42% of the second party preferred, which is quite remarkable. I didn't think that they would be able to beat Abbott like that, but it just shows how many supporters get up, pumped into that campaign, how many millions they pumped into that campaign, and compare Warringah to, for instance, the rest of the country, and you see a big difference. I mean, the only places where the Labor Party gained or the left gained was in Warringah and in 2 seats in Victoria. You know, that's the only places really where they had any gain, especially when this climate agenda was such an important issue to everybody. Even people in Victoria rejected it. I mean, if the 2 seats only went slightly towards the Labor Party, and I mean, as we've seen here, one of them is still in doubt in Chisholm, so really only Dunkley has gone to the Labor Party thus far. That kind of shows you that maybe the climate agenda that you rave on about isn't very important, and maybe people are starting to see it for what it is.
Yeah, Barnaby Joyce on election night, he said, well, get up, you concentrated all your resources in Warringah. Like, you managed to get rid of Tony Abbott, you know, you're glad about that, but you forgot about the rest of the country. Like, you know, what are you going to say to all your investors? You wasted all their money. And like, Zali Steggall was the only successful Liberal independent that was backed by not just Get Up, but Alex Turnbull. I remember there was Oliver Yates in Kooyong taking on Josh Frydenberg. There was also Rob Oakeshott in Cowper trying to return. Then there was also Julia Banks in my seat of Flinders. Greg Hunt still won that seat. And Dave Sharma in Wentworth looks like on his second attempt, winning that seat off independent Karen Phelps. And Alex Turnbull and the Turnbull family, their vengeful campaign, it failed. Alex Turnbull deleted his Twitter account today. He's got nothing else to say. He was had a lot to say before, but Alex, you know, where are you?
Exactly. When they lose, they run, don't they? They run and hide, the tears. I mean, you know, it's quite remarkable that these people, like I said, I heard left-wing, whether it be Labor Party pollies yesterday on the TV in the election coverage, and they were just so in denial. I mean, all they could say was the Clive Palmer Party and the One Nation preferences work for the Liberals, and that's why we lost. They could not understand that there was so much in this campaign that their agenda was rejected. Their platform was rejected. The high taxes, the climate change agenda, the attack on private schools, all these things people didn't want a bar of. And until they understand this and start going to their base and representing what they're supposed to be, rather than this, you know, extreme left Green Party that they're, you know, basically become, then they will remain in opposition for a long time. And when it comes to the, you know, because Bill Shorten obviously chose to stand down yesterday, which, you know, was obvious that was going to happen. I mean, it's very rare to see a leader have more than 2 goes at an election. But, I mean, I hope the Labor Party picks someone like Plibersek, so then they end up getting slaughtered next time round. I mean, you know, let it be another Julia Gillard situation. I'm keen on seeing that, you know. I mean, I really am. I mean, until they choose somebody that's half decent, you know, a real worker, somebody that isn't involved in this, in these environmentalist arguments, and in these the social extremist, like I said, the social policies were even worse than the economic ones. Yes, we were going to probably plunge into debt again. We were going to have all the taxes risen on us. But socially, they were even going to do even more harm. And that's what really was going to worry voters, I think.
Yeah, and the left, they also haven't reacted well out on the street. In Tasmania, a One Nation campaign van has been torched,
Wow.
which is... And let's not remember what the left did during the campaign. I mean, there was the Tony Abbott supporter who was stabbed with a screwdriver on election eve. There was a turd that was sent in a book to Tony Abbott's office. And let's not forget that in the seat of Corangamite, there was a political assassination of a dog, which is, I thought, the left was supposed to be for animal justice. They killed a family dog for political reasons. Dogs love everybody. Like, the fact that that wasn't a bigger story, the murder of an innocent animal, like, that was disgusting.
Well, the left, I mean, they kill babies, so why wouldn't they kill a dog? I mean, normally they rate they normally rate animals above humans. I mean, that's something that you can say about the left. But in saying this, even how bizarre and extreme they are, you'd think that would be, something that they wouldn't be capable of, to kill an animal. But nevertheless, it would be interesting to ask Animal Justice Party what they thought about that. But I'm sure they'll come up with an excuse somehow. I just know how they operate. They never can concede when they do the wrong thing. And they are always the ones that are violent and that end up, pushing this extreme agenda. I mean, if you watch the mainstream news, you'd think the exact opposite. But on the right, you never get any violence at all. You never get violence perpetrated on the right at all. People might not like a lot of the views that are pushed forward on the right, but at the end of the day, they aren't violent. They are allowing others to have different opinions to them, unlike what they do. So it's a very big difference on the approach that they take. And it just, I think people are starting to see this, I think people are really starting to see this for what it is. I mean, they're starting to see who's the violent ones, who's got the extreme views, really. And they just aren't buying it anymore. The media is going to have to change tactics, I think.
Now, the Liberal Party, they've successfully shaken off the ghost of Turnbull. His family's campaign of sabotage didn't work. Scott Morrison is now a elected Prime Minister in his own right. He's pretty much, everyone said he's going to be a Liberal hero now. So he's going to have absolute authority in the party room. They've got the new leadership rules where it has to be a 2/3 majority of the party room. But, Scott Morrison, he's been able to, because the Liberal Party teared itself apart when Turnbull was being deposed, but Morrison, to his credit, is able to bring the moderates and the Conservatives together, and the sky's the limit now. The Labor Party's been broken. They don't have a leader federally or in New South Wales. The Conservatives have come up trumps.
Well, I definitely see that. And, you got to give credit to him. He was able to show people who he was. He was a legitimate, a real person. He's someone that a lot of people could relate to with his, the daddy dad sort of kind of character that he was able to show to the electorate. Someone that wasn't scared of embracing his religion, with having cameras take photos of him. I mean, that was a very gutsy thing to do. I'm telling you now, because religion isn't really seen as such a positive anymore, like it was, for instance, when even Howard was in government. It's changed. It could have been something that worked against him, but at the end of the day, he still did it out of principle, and people saw that. People saw, what, this guy is who he is. He's not a robot. He has some policies that I would disagree with. It's hard to find somebody you're going to agree with on everything. But one thing I have to say about Morrison is what he needs to do is make sure he doesn't go left like Turnbull did and remains more of a conservative, more like how Abbott was, because you can see the stark difference that when Abbott was the hateable conservative leader, how much of a big wipeout election victory he beat Labor on, whereas when Turnbull was seen as basically a very green Liberal, he nearly lost the election. So I think ScoMo needs to go down the first path that I mentioned, which was really a path that Howard took. Even though he embraced all the different views in the Liberal Party, he was still seen as a conservative leader. And ultimately, I think the electorate warms to that, even though the media continues to say that that is not the case. All you have to do is look at the election victories that the Liberal Party win, and they're always the big victories are won by the conservative leaders, ones that are socially conservative, very pro-family values, very and actually talk about these things, you know. I mean, I actually think that Morrison should have spoken about, you know, the abortion policies of Labor and the Labor attacks on Catholic schools. He should have mentioned these things. I think he would have even gotten a bigger vote. He chose not to because he thought it might be risky, but he has to understand that despite what the media say, a lot of people in the electorate are for those things. They really do embrace, I mean, even the working class electorates that Labor territory in, say, Western Sydney, when you have leaders like Abbott that are socially conservative, they swing to him, and he was able to have the majority of seats in working class neighbourhoods. I mean, they actually won Lindsay.
Yeah, and they retained
Yeah.
Reid and Banks as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good balance there. I mean, Reid is really your sort of Turnbull sort of type of electorate, a small L Liberal electorate. And on the other hand, Lindsay is a working class, more socially conservative type of electorate. So that shows to me that both sides can definitely see some promise in what Scott Morrison is pitching here.
Yeah, and like you said, they're winning back they're winning the working class. Labor's losing the working class, and it was pointed out by Andrew Bolt that all the key moderates have pulled the pin. Turnbull's gone, Julie Bishop is gone, Christopher Pyne is gone, Craig Laundy is gone. All of these, I call them soaking wet Liberals, they're gone, and now it's, you know, the Conservatives and sort of the sensible classical Liberals who are now in the broad church together, and it's a happy congregation.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's still a few out in the Liberal Party that I must say I'm not too fond of, like Wilson, Zimmerman and Ensch, for instance. But nevertheless, I mean, that side of the party is starting to shrink a little bit, which is good news, I think. Like, there's nothing wrong with having an element in that party that represents a moderate view. But I think the moderates have to also allow, like they did with Howard, to have socially conservative views attached to that party too, because it is a vote winner. I don't care what anybody says, it is a vote winner. The working class loves it. You know, ethnic working class voters love that stuff, and they turn to the Liberal Party when they do it. And it just shows the stark difference of when they had the left-leaning Liberal leaders in power, when it came to people like Nelson and Turnbull and even Hewson before that, Peacock and whatever else. I mean, it's, you know, they don't win elections, you know, like, I mean, and the Liberal Party need to learn from this. Ignore the media. Ignore what they say about polls. If they say you're down 60-40, then who cares? Just ignore it. Do what you have to do and remain united and remain on point, and just, you know, because they try and manipulate. They have manipulated the party to change leadership multiple times. I mean, it was a disaster when they dumped Abbott in the first place. It was a disaster. I mean, Abbott could have definitely won a second time around. I mean, anyone could have beaten Shorten, really. I mean, you know, I don't think it took a genius to do that, but as if Abbott wasn't going to win a second time. I mean, it's very easy for the government in power to lose a little bit support throughout, you know, the first or second year. But when it comes closer to election, it would have bounced back for him. You know, they didn't have to change, but instead they bowed to pressure. Oh, no, you know, we're going to lose our jobs, this and that, you know. I mean, focus on what's good on the country and don't worry about your jobs. Focus on what's best for the country, and that is the problem. They're just concerned about their seats. Oh, they're on a marginal seat. Oh, we're doing bad in the polls, that means I'm going to lose. Well, not really, because we've seen seats that were supposed to be losers for the coalition. Chisholm, that was supposed to be gone out of the picture, yet the Liberals are just slightly ahead here. I mean, the Liberals were able to win two Tasmanian seats back. They were able to win a couple of seats in Queensland because of the mine issue. Wentworth they got back. So, I mean, what happened to this, the whole punishment of the Conservative Party and, this big climate change sort of issue? Why didn't Phelps win then? Why didn't Phelps retain her seat? Why didn't Julia Banks win?
Yeah.
Flinders, this is the problem here. I mean, fair enough, Warringah, I concede that, but like you mentioned before, they pumped everything into that seat, everything, and sometimes it's just, I mean, if Clive Palmer put in $50 million into Warringah, he probably would have won it, I mean, but he spread out nationwide, and that's why he was able to not get the big vote that he deserved. But at the end of the day, that's how it works,
Yeah, and Labor's now got to have a leadership contest. It's probably going to be Anthony Albanese. Tanya Plibersek this morning on Insiders. Well, Albo's already announced she doesn't look like she really wants it. And I'd probably say that Richard Marles is probably going to be the shadow treasurer. I mean, after the tax agenda has been rejected, Chris Bowen can't be shadow treasurer. But as I said, they probably should have picked Albo 6 years ago. I mean, he's the, being objective, he's the authentic Labor person that, you'd want leading a party.
Yes, he is a more genuine character and more likable character than Shorten is. That is 100% sure. But if Albo becomes leader and he continues to run on the same platform, then that's it. You know what I mean? He has to learn from this. He has to go back to the past when they used to stand for working class voters. He can't continue pushing this green agenda. And I mean, he's on the left of the party. So he might even be worse than Shorten when it comes to this stuff. I mean, that's the scary element here. Even though he's a likable character, if he's on the left of the party, and unless he's like a more sort of authoritarian left rather than a green left, you know what I mean? And he's going to continue running on this sort of green agenda that ultimately isn't going to win him elections. So he needs to learn. He needs to reconnect with his base. And I don't know if he's willing to do that. I mean, what do you get from that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think the best thing about the election result is that Labor and the Greens are not going to shut us down for hate speech. Remember that Richard Di Natale wanted a Sky News shutdown for hate speech. So who knows what they would have had in store for us. But we're here, and we've got a real adrenaline about this victory for the Conservative side of politics, and certainly motivates us to keep going in what we're doing here at the Unshackled. Exactly.
I mean, we all need to have a voice, because people have to understand that our kind of political positions aren't represented in the general consensus of the media. The media is very biased. It's very one-sided, because obviously they have agendas at heart. And we all know that, and people are starting to become more aware of it. And one good thing about the internet is that we are able to, and with social media, we have been able to show different views, different points of views, and inform people on that. Despite all of the bad things, at least when the internet was created and social media was created, they may have thought in the back of their heads that they're not doing it for the right reasons, but we have actually seen some positive elements in that. And that is that we have had a voice now, whereas before we wouldn't have had the power to create a newspaper a publication, for instance. We wouldn't have the money and the backing to do something like that, whereas it costs absolutely nothing for us to write articles and for us to share things, content on Facebook and other platforms. And it's something that's very important, because people need to hear something different. They need to hear a balance in the media. And we're providing that here with the Unshackled. And we have done so for a couple of years now, and we will continue to do that as long as we're not shut down. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that won't happen.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. Well, thank you to everyone who watched this special live episode tonight on YouTube. It definitely the interaction in the live chat, it motivates us to keep going. And thank you for the super chats, and especially for tuning in tonight, especially after we went for so long last night. So people, it looks like can't get enough Unshackled fix. Of course, if you want to keep us, we do plan to do more of these live shows. We want to be more breaking news, comment on things as they happen. Please support our work. You can support us on patreon.com/The Unshackled, or donate via paypal.me/The Unshackled, or our premium membership option at theunshackled.net/support options/premium membership. And thank you for joining me tonight, Damien. It's your first live show. How did you find it?
No, it was really good. I mean, we were able to have a good wrap up of everything that happened last night, and provide people with something different that they would have heard anywhere else in regards to media. Like I mentioned before, it was good to provide a bit of insight on the other side of the fence, that we were able to get our view out there on what we thought the result meant. So I think that was a very important element, and I think people will have a great respect for that and continue to follow us in the future.
So thanks everyone for your company, and we'll see you next show. Oh, I've got to play the outro music properly. So good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Unshackled Waves. Please visit theunshackledwaves.net for all the ways to subscribe and follow the show. Don't forget to pick up your free ebook at theunshackledbattlefield.net, and keep checking out theunshackled.net for all the latest news and commentary.